I remember all these proposals coming in. It was a small job, right? We had three contractors per trade. I think it was a tenant improvement. We used to do a lot of work for Fox, all their offices and stuff. Pretty basic stuff. All these proposals started coming in, and I was floored. I took these papers in, I put them on the desk of the project manager, and she happened to be the owner too, and I said, what is wrong with these people? She's like, what are you talking about? Go, look at these prices and exclusions and inclusions. They all have the same plans and specs. Why are the prices all so different? What I expected in my mind, because I had not been educated on it yet, and that's why I want to share it with you. Have you ever looked at a brand new car sticker? It tells you exactly what's in that car and exactly what everything costs to the penny, right? What we do with estimating, that doesn't happen. Every single proposal will be different. In my whole career, I have never got a proposal where two proposals side by side for the same trade on the same job had the same inclusions and exclusions. And I don't mean to say like, yes, we bid it per plans and specs. I don't mean that. When it comes down to the brass tacks, what really is in their scope, and it's always different. Always. So, that's a little bit of my journey. And then, of course, where I'm at today, I work for a very large company called ConstructConnect. We actually have 9 different companies, and each one of you probably uses one of our products now. We own 4 takeoff products, PlanSwift, OST, Folksoft, and ConstructConnect Takeoff. We own 3 bid management solutions, I²Foot, SmartBid, which is where I came from, and also ConstructConnect, our new platform. And then we also own a lot of project leads companies, CMD, CDC, and BigClerk. So if you haven't used one of our products, your company probably has. They're probably using one of those. So this has kind of come up to where I'm at in my career now. I get to go out and help people, and I absolutely love doing this. Again, I'm very humble. I do not know everything, but I think it's important that you know where I came from, and I'm hoping that some of you kind of came from that same journey too. How many have actually worked in the field in here? It's usually about half, and that's good. And I don't mean to make anybody feel uneasy if you haven't. It's okay. Have that passion, what I was talking about there. If you have that passion, there's ways that passion can overcome not having a field experience. Because I've met plenty of guys coming from the field, couldn't estimate to save their life, right? So it's about what your passion is and your talents. So, as a superintendent, I used to laugh because I thought the project managers and the estimators were always out of their minds when I was on the job site. Because I'd be out in the field, and I'm supposed to be managing all these contractors. And I don't know if any of you have, and I would hear this from the subs, I don't have that in my scope. What do you mean? You're the door guy. You're supposed to hang this door. No, I included like hanging the frames and stuff, but I'm not putting all the hardware on it. Just using an example. So I was like, how did you even get the contract? Because I didn't handle that. So as a superintendent, I had to deal with that in the field. This still happens daily, especially on hard bid jobs. There's a lot that's misconceived, and if you don't have clear documentation and understand that project, and if you haven't conveyed that to the PM, who conveys it to the superintendent and so on, it starts a lot of wrestling. And what I mean by that is on the job site, and I've seen it happen. You have a sub that you think is supposed to install all these floor monuments, right? On the floor, all these electrical plates. I don't have them in my bid. It's got to get done. Who's going to do it? Right? So the more you know that project ahead of time and you work with your subcontractors on including everything that you need for their scope, makes it much easier for the superintendents and people running the project later. Your job is so important as the estimator to make sure you dot those I's and cross those T's as much as you possibly can. And let's face it, it all comes down to not just an inconvenience in the field where guys are arguing, it comes down to hard money. Companies go out of business for missing things. Now you might think something like, the example I used, a guy missing hanging door hardware is not such a big deal. As a superintendent, when things were missed, I had to do all that work. Let's say it's a high rise, and there's 5,000 doors in this building. now you've got a problem. There's no way you're going to do it. You've got to hire somebody, and it's not going to be cheap. And I'm using something really simple. So it's really important that you always think about and focus on what you're doing, okay? So some of the things I would have to do is I would check the contract and see if it was in there, and I'd say, well, it's in your contract. Anyways, the point is, it starts all the arguing back and forth. But if the estimator does his job well, if you guys do your job well, then these kind of things happen less in the field. And remember, it all comes down to money, okay? Just a little secret. As a superintendent, I kept a lot of t-shirts for our company in the truck toolbox, and that alleviated a lot of change orders. Just by the way, I'll tell you what, if you hang those doors, I'll give you 2 t-shirts. Okay, I'll do it. So just a little joke. Not something you can put in your spreadsheet for cost. Okay. So remember, an estimation estimating is an estimation of the cost. Now, I think that word is used loosely because an estimate, if you go get an estimate on getting your car fixed, and I don't know how many have done this, when you actually get the bill, it's usually a little bit different than the estimate because it's just an estimate based on all the information you can see on your car, all the damage that's been done. It's an estimate. It's no different than what we're doing. What you're providing is estimating a cost based on all the information that you have available at your fingertips to the best possible number that you can. And yes, we'll still call it a quote or a proposal because somebody's going to stick you to that number. But remember, the estimate is you're just, to the best of your ability, you're trying to provide a number for that specific item. It's not like a retail where I can say, this is going to cost $50. No matter what it really costs, that's what I'm going to sell it for. It's not like that. I'm trying to build the best possible price that I can, based on all the information that I get. Using all the given CDs and all other provided information to provide a cost. Who knows what CDs are? I'm going to have a lot of questions for you guys, and I won't move forward until somebody answers. Yes, sir.
Construction documents.
Thank you very much. A lot of this has been basic, and Eric actually asked me to ask me even more questions this year, so that's why I'm going to do that. I want to make sure everybody knows that. So CDs are construction documents. Construction documents can contain everything: spreadsheets, Word docs, PDFs, pictures, videos, anything that's relevant to that specific project can be considered CDs. Because with all that information, you're going to provide a line item number to the best of your ability with your knowledge, skills, punches, and tools for the scope of work provided. And I want to emphasize on this for a minute. Your knowledge of the trade that you're working with at that moment, your knowledge, your concept of it, the skills that you may have acquired on several things. Could be you actually worked in that specific trade, skills that you have with the software that you're using, whatever. Everybody has developed their own set of skills. Punches play a big part in a lot of this. You've got to, if you have the passion for it, you're going to get a good feeling or a bad feeling. And the more that you do the estimating, that starts happening naturally. You get a number from a guy, and you just see it. You don't even, there's something about that proposal that you see, and you just got a hunch that this isn't good. Even if it's a super high number, super low, you've got to rely on that. I call it my spidey sense, but anyways, you've got to rely on your hunches. Tools. Tools will include everything from, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit, and we're going to get down into exactly what that is, because tools can be manual, they can be digital, they can be virtual. There's all sorts of different tools that you're going to have available. Your laptop, your phone is a tool, right? So you're going to use all of these things in your job. There's other items too, but we're going to kind of go through that as well. There's 3 distinctive things that really can help drive you to be successful as an estimator. Work experience, obviously that's going to help. So estimation unrelated to construction. So what I mean by that is if you don't have work experience in construction, but you have work experience in something possibly similar. If you were an auto adjuster, you had to provide an estimate, and I like to use that word because it's real similar. But there's other things too that you've done that you try to correlate that with what you're doing with estimating, and it can help you with the past work experience that you've had. Why do you think, let's say how many have ever had a house claim, an insurance claim on your house? Okay. When you did that, how do you think, when you went through that process, they probably used Xactimate, probably had a line item and you kind of went through that. If that were your job doing that, do you think that would be beneficial to you if you were doing estimating now? Obviously, because it's still kind of construction related. But anything that's even close to that, anything where you have to provide or think through a process to get to a number is going to help you. Obviously, education. College Station has Texas A&M, and they have a huge construction science, and there's a lot of colleges around the country that do that. Trade schools, obviously, that's a huge push now. Thank you, Mike Rowe, for a lot of coverage on that. Unfortunately, like for my past, I came from an agricultural area, and we always had ag mechanics, and they taught you all of the construction skills in high school. That's hopefully going to come back at some point, having that education when you're still at school. And apprenticeships. Do you guys have apprenticeships here locally? Anybody got? You do? Good. That's awesome. Help those people that are doing those. Really push and strive for that. Because what's happening a lot, I'm not putting down colleges and universities. Please don't send me emails or hate mail on it. All I'm saying is this is not the only way. There's several others that I don't even list. But there's always opportunities, and we're really talking about that in the industry now. Estimators can make a really good living, a really good, comfortable living, and not have that debt behind them. So, just something I wanted to mention. And field experience. For me, my agricultural background helped a lot. My dad, but rest in peace, he wasn't the smartest guy, but he had more common sense than anybody I've ever met. And I'm going to tell you right now, if you don't know what common sense is, because a lot of young people haven't had to really, let's see, let me think of an example of this. So, back in the day when you could actually work on a car, if you broke down, and I would be driving a 14, for example, or to a sales auction, and a car would break down, you had to get out and figure out how to get it started, or you're stuck, right? So you had to use common sense, and common sense could mean, what do I have in my truck? My muffler just fell off. What do I have that's going to help me? I got some baling wire in here, got a pair of pliers. Use my common sense to put together. What I'm driving at is use common sense when you're doing anything, especially in this industry. If it looks too good to be true, it probably isn't. You've heard that. That's the same thing in estimating. You get lowball numbers. It's like my son, my 18-year-old son came to me the other day and he said, look what I found on Craigslist. It's a 2015 Dodge. It's black. It's four-wheel drive, and it's only $3,000. I don't know if you've ever seen those ads, right? If it's too good to be true, it's not. So it's the same thing. So using some of these skills, your past field experience, if you have any, your education, all of these are going to be very important going forward. One thing that we mentioned in there is never, ever stop learning. I never pretend I know it all. I love when people show me something that I would, something in Excel or a new way to log into a different program or something, because these are all tools, and I love knowing different ways to use the tools that I never thought of. Never stop wanting to learn. Do not ever put yourself in a position where you think you know it all. You've got to humble yourself and be able to listen. And I love this because there's other ones too kind of like this. These guys are pushing this, right? I'm going to explain it. I know it's self-explanatory. I'm trying to push this square-wheeled cart to go somewhere. The guy's like, dude, I've got these to help you, man. We're too busy. Don't make yourself fall in that trap. All right? So again, just to rehash, some of the skills that you can get can come from field experience. If you've ever had a supervisory position, let's say you worked as a supervisor at a Walmart, I don't know, whatever. If you have those skills to organize and manage people, that's also going to help you in your trade. So it's all sorts of skills that you have that you can adapt as an estimator. If you're a people person, if you can speak in public, If you can draw, I don't know, whatever your skills are, utilize those in your estimating role. Tools, material and software, and then managerial. So again, any of these kind of skills that you have that you're really excellent at, I call them talents as well, skills, talents that you have. Try to find your niche within this estimating role where your skills will actually help with something. Hunches. Really? Yes, absolutely. Educated guess. You're going to have to use that a lot. You're going to come down to a point, you've got 2 seconds to make a decision on a line item. I don't know if maybe the company you work for does hard bids. Super intense. And it comes right down to the minute, and you've got to make a decision, and your boss is looking at you. Did you include this? Are you good with this number? You have everything in here? You better know. And if you don't know, if you don't have actual backup on it, you better make a very well-educated guess on it. And what we call those is swag numbers. Does anybody know what swag means? Have you heard that term before? Swag number? It's probably the same thing. There's different ones. Pardon me for this. I don't swear often. It's a silly, wild-ass guess. And I've heard other terms. And that's, you'll hear that, and I think people use that. It just means this is our best guess. It's an educated guess. You're going to hear that going forward in your career probably several times. So that's what a swag number is. Tools. We're going to get more into the tools later. We're actually going to deep dive a little bit into that. So I'm going to kind of skip over that a little bit. You're also going to use some other options. Remember, we've talked about knowledge, skills, your past, your talents, education. Some other items that are going to help you in your career is knowing what unit pricing is. And so, some of these things you start developing. So you're going to start learning some unit costs. You're going to know after you use so many of the same type of job, pretty much what a carpet square footage is going to be for a typical type of project. How much paint's going to be per square foot. You're going to start knowing and getting this information in your head, so when proposals start coming in, you're going to start recognizing this already looks good. You'll be able to recognize that. There's some other stuff. What else that I haven't mentioned? And there's tons of things. What else have I not mentioned that might help you in your estimator role that I haven't mentioned?
Access to information such as code.
Right. See, I wouldn't even thought of that, but you're 100% right. Access to codes. Access to codes information. You're exactly right. What else? What's something that you are doing right now that helps you in your job that I haven't mentioned? Or that I have mentioned? It's close. Don't be shy. Still got it. Anything. Your phone? See? Does your phone help you in your job? Writing skills? Okay.
Suppliers, websites.
That's great. Man, back in the day, I did outsource estimating for a long time. And we had, back in the day, we had RSMeans, and we had a few other catalogs that you could get for unit pricing, because I'd be putting budgets together all the time. Now I can jump on Google if I want to. And I can find pricing at least enough to go with my educated guess. That's a great add. So the internet is a plethora of knowledge that you can find. You still have to disseminate it and figure out what's best for what you're doing. That's a great answer. All right, inclusions and exclusions. Better get used to those things, right? What are those exactly? What's an inclusion? What's an inclusion?
Something included in a contract and excluded from a contract.
Very good. That's exactly what it is. Again, remember, I'm going back to the basics because I don't want to assume that you know what those are. And the reason I like to push that is because, remember, I told you the story. When I first went into the office, I had no clue. They were speaking all this lingo. And I was just using my common sense to kind of pretend I knew what was going on until I caught up. So I want to make sure that you understand some of those. So Inclusions and exclusions, you're going to see that a lot where a sub may, he may include everything that the next sub does. That's where you're using to level them out, apples for apples. You want to make sure they have in their scope everything that's required in the documents. If they don't, you have to start figuring out how to get them leveled out. So if you've got, let's say you've got a drywall subs, and they're just building this lobby, or this room right here. And let's say that there's level 5 finish on one wall. Level 5 is a very expensive finish for a drywall. It's like a completely smooth wall. Different than just a regular wall. They call it level 4, or if it's textured. Let's say you have a proposal where the guy says the prices are both very similar, but one guy says exclusion excludes level 5 finish. You've got a problem now, because now maybe his number was a little lower, but he's missing part of that scope. Again, the lowest price is not always the best price. So he's excluded a specific part of a scope that you would assume he is automatically going to pick up. So that's the key things you're going to focus on. Don't get yourself in that rut of looking at the bottom line price immediately and thinking that's what it is. I always look at that first, and I already know where I should be because I've done my takeoffs. I think I know where I should be. If it's really low, I go right to the inclusions and exclusions immediately, which you're going to have to do anyways. That's going to be part of your job on every single project, on every single proposal that comes in from a subcontractor. You're going to have to see the price, their scope, and their inclusions and exclusions. And you're going to have to get used to them. Again, not one of those documents ever really being the same. Inclusions and exclusions. What is the one thing they have in common? Inclusions and exclusions. And I mentioned it before. It's super, super important. Almost more important than anything else.
Their obligations.
That's to do with money. It all comes down to money. You take a subcontract, or you put out a subcontract on a guy, and in his contract he didn't cover something like that level 5 finish that I was talking about. Someone's going to pay for it, but it comes down to it, it was on the drawings. And if you have a contract with that guy and he specifically excluded that, now you can try to put it in your contract to him to include it. Either way, you're going to have some arm wrestling going on, right? So takeaways, again, it's, the tools that you're going to use, your knowledge, skills, hunches, and tools that we're going to talk about a little bit more. And then anything else, we're talking about any of your talents, knowledge, history, memory, whatever. If you have a photographic memory, that's awesome. That'll definitely help you. Anything else that's going to give you more advantage on that. In fact, the company I told you I worked for, there was a woman-owned general contractor business. She had a photographic memory. Could you imagine, most of you are doing some sort of estimating right now, I'm assuming. Can you imagine looking at the plan and remembering everything on there and not having to go back to it? Yeah, that would be amazing. All right, before I move on, any questions about what I've talked about? Your knowledge, your skills, anything like that? Okay. How many are actively, before we go forward, how many are actively working for a company in an estimating role? Almost all of you. Okay. How many are in a project engineer or project management role? So, okay, good. Some of this might seem a little elementary, and again, like I said at the beginning, I apologize, but I don't want to assume everybody knows this, and I was asked to do it very specifically this way. So, and if you do know these things, it's always good to hear it from somebody else. Kind of gives you a little bit more muscle for it. Share your knowledge with others too. Okay. So, what is plan rating? Well, I think it's pretty basic. Everybody knows a set of plans is all the drawings and everything that I need to look at to figure out what needs to happen on this project. But most of us won't go through a plan reading class. Has anybody gone through an actual plan reading class? You have? Well, several. That's a lot more than I ever did. I never did, and I had to learn the hard way. So, how many have never seen drawings? Couple. Okay. Think of it as a map. Think of it as your map. Well, now we have Google. We used to have paper maps, and the maps would have a legend on the side that showed what all the symbols meant on that map. Did you know that certain highways have different colors and means different things. Did you know that highways that have even numbers mean something different than highways that have odd numbers? One goes north-south, one goes east-west. Anyways, drawing blueprints actually help you use symbols, abbreviations, acronyms, and everything to understand. If you see something on that plan, there is like a little library to go to understand what it is. Most of it's pretty consistent on what those symbols are, but they do vary a little bit. We're going to talk about that. First off is when you get a set of plans, and I recommend, yes, digital is great. It saves paper, saves trees. Love that. But if you get a chance, get a set of paper drawings and put them down in front of you, and just orientate yourself. And by that, think of a road map. Where's north, right? Where am I? Where am I on this project? This is, it says floor plan. What am I actually looking at? You want to orientate yourself. Quick little story, quick little side note. When I took my job interview as a superintendent for my next step as a larger commercial construction company, I was pretty weak in structural. And I did not like structural drawings. I just had this just hard time getting over because they were so. I love architectural drawings. I'm a Division 9 guy. I love all the finishes, right? And I go to this interview, and I mean, on the way there, I was like, okay, God, please tell me we have structural drawings. Go into their office, laid out, and it was a full structure. It was a parking garage. It was all structural. Very little architectural drawings. It's like, oh man. But same thing. Just swallowed my pride, took a deep breath, and I just orientated myself on the plans, understood where I was. And it's really, I'm trying to say it's simple, but it is that simple. Once you orientate yourself and understand what you're looking at, just the basics, it's easy then to start diving into it deeper. So you want to orientate yourself with the drawings. Understand. If you're looking at me, all of a sudden you realize they're upside down. I've seen this on job sites many times where even the owner, oh yeah, looks great. And I'll be like, okay, let me turn this around. Because that's what it's really supposed to look like. So orientate yourself with the drawings. Digitally, same thing. Look at the drawing and try to understand. We were talking in there about visualize. Back in the day, we didn't have BIM. We had occasionally an architect would draw a 3D version of a portion of the project. But try to imagine yourself walking through that structure or that room or whatever, just by looking at the 2D. You have to visualize it. If you have that knack, that's awesome. That's a great advantage to you. When I started, I didn't have that. I would work with these guys and we'd go out to a job site and they would actually like visualize the whole thing complete. And I'm looking at it, I don't see it. I don't see it. I never thought I was going to make it. It was that bad. And finally just kept at it until I just finally started visualizing what I was building. A way to do that, the very first project that you estimate after this, if you can, if you have the opportunity, look at the job site photos as this thing starts building. If you guys have live feed of it, watch it being built. If it's close enough to you, stop by and watch it being built. They're building what you had on paper, what you had in a spreadsheet. And once you start visualizing that, then the next project, it becomes a little bit easier to understand what that wall detail meant, what that footing definition meant. Make sense? Okay. Another thing to get familiar with, and of course every company does some things different, whether you do negotiated work, whether you do just hard bid, whatever the case is. You're going to deal, at some point in your career, probably, with a conceptual drawing. A conceptual drawing can just be a floor plan. Maybe there's not even a floor plan. Somebody comes to you and says, hey, we need a building that's going to be this, or we need a warehouse that's going to have a couple bathrooms, whatever the case is. You've got to put a concept together that hopefully they'll have an architect or somebody sketch it out. I've done this on napkins. I've even used my OST to just draw it out myself and do a rough estimate on it. But there's different phases, and you're going to see that happen. What you're probably more familiar with is addenda. It's almost the same thing, but it's just a little bit of a different flow. You get a set of drawings, and you've done your estimate, you've done your takeoff, and you're working on it, and then you get an addenda. Anybody not know what an addenda is? It's okay to raise your hand. It's a change. It's a change in scope. It's a change in something on the drawing. And it is a fallacy to believe The architect clouds every single change. You'll see what's called a delta set. You'll get a delta, it's a triangle. Sometimes they don't even do that. You just get a new set of, maybe it's a new floor plan. They moved this column, they moved the wall closer to the column. That's the big change. If it's not clouded, it can easily get missed, right? And it's important that you get that information to your subs. With the, like the products we have and some of the other products that are out there, you can overlay drawings on top of each other and see immediately in different colors what's actually changed. Yes, sir?
Yeah, just an example of that, last year we were building a big bus terminal for the KCATA. We had some building elevations that needed to be changed, but what they ended up doing is changing a lot of the concrete work elevations, even stuff that was already built, and it didn't get caught until way down the road. So we ended up having some transitions in our concrete that didn't look normal because it just wasn't marked out. It just changed the elevations without really catching it.
And that can be critical. Great example of that too. Thank you for sharing that. It was a relatively small job. It was a big strip mall. They would build a Starbucks in or something like that. This has been in Santa Barbara. They had to do an opening on this building, just an opening in the brick wall. Well, this is California, so it has to be seismic, structurally sound, seismically sound. And they had two beams and two columns and a beam, and the wide flange beams were like this thick. I mean, these things weighed like 600 pounds a foot. They were huge, right? So as a superintendent, I had to make sure all the drawings were correct, shop drawings were correct, everything was coming out. I had the footings poured. I poured the footings because the columns were coming in the next day. And I poured the footings, and I started driving home 2 hours home, and something clicked. I went, oh, crap. Because something had changed in the drawings, and I remembered, I didn't flag it, I had to drive back and go shovel all of that concrete out of the footings by myself all night long. Not all night, it was several hours. Because the next day those columns were going to come in, and they would have been, the concrete would have already been set. Anyways, the point is, yes, changes happen on drawings, and if you're not using technology to find those, somehow you better find those before it goes forward. Because it's going to cost somebody a lot of money. I imagine that costed a lot of money and time, where nothing fits, especially if you're dealing with structural, the steel and concrete. It's not just like, okay, well, we'll just move it over. No, somebody's going to pay to demo it, redo it, and that's not good. All right, so one of the things that's really cool about most plan sets, everyone will have what they call, it's either they call it an index sheet, or it's a general sheet, it's an information sheet. There's different terms for it. Most of the time, I call it an index sheet. This will give you a full kind of library of everything that you want to find on that plan. And what I mean by that, this is your legend as if it were a map. This is all, it's going to tell you what these symbols are. They're somewhat universal, but not completely. This is going to show you what these symbols mean, what's an elevation mean, and what's a cross-section mean. And we're going to talk about that here in a second. This also shows you the drawing manifest, shows you who the architect is, and give you the engineer's information sometimes on the sheet and so on. And here's the list of acronyms. Nobody reads these until you don't. You're looking at it and going, what the heck does SCR mean or whatever? I don't even know. And I'll go to this sheet and I'll find it and go, well, that's stupid. That doesn't even mean that. But the point is, that's where you can find that information. I know I'm getting a little bit basic on some of this stuff, but I want you to understand that that's where you can find most of your information. If it's not correct, because a lot of architects, remember the architects are the low bidders too. So they're going to cut corners too on anything they can. So a lot of this is what we call boilerplate stuff. It's just stuff that they just copy and paste onto the next project. So once you've orientated, you're kind of familiar with plans, you're going to be able to look stuff at like this right here, just by glancing at that. Glancing at that. What kind of project do you think that is? Yep, gymnasium. Pretty easy when you saw the basketball.
Right.
Things. But you would be surprised, and probably nobody spoke up, looking at it going, I have no idea.
It took me a minute.
But the point is, that's good though. It took you a minute, but you orientate yourself. Now you kind of start, you start looking at your drawings differently. You start imagining, where's the front door? And I'm going to walk through this project. I want to walk through it. Imagine myself actually walking through it to kind of get orientated with it. You will develop that. You'll develop that skill because you're going to have to. It's actually part of your job. And that helps you understand the scope of the project. You have to imagine it to the best of your ability. And if you have BIM, if you guys are using that in your office, that makes that a lot easier. It does, there's no doubt. But a lot of you won't have that. Not yet. So make sure that you're able to orientate yourself on those drawings. So once you do that, you're going to start seeing these, and it's going to be really quick to be able to read those. I can look at a plan and orientate myself in a matter of seconds. It'd be good. Most of the time. Depends on the architect. But however, you give me a set of this, and I'm totally lost. Anybody know what this is? Can you tell? It took me a minute when somebody did this. It's a Barbie dollhouse assembly plan. I couldn't read this to save my life, but I can read a set of blueprints. So, all right. So let's review a few blueprint rules of the road. The index sheet. Remember, that's where all your acronyms are going to be. That's where the basic project information will be there as well. How many square footage. Sometimes the code requirements are on there, who the engineers are, where the major players are that are on that project, the architect's design team. All that information is generally on the general sheet or the index sheet. So you want to make sure that you orientate yourself with that. That is your map to the plans, or your legend, if you will. We talked about this. By the way, this I have a lot of notes in my PowerPoint on this, and if you guys want a copy of this PowerPoint, because we won't go through everything today, there won't be time, there's a lot of stuff on here, I'd be more than happy to send it to you. So you just give me your card or something like that. So what key bits of information, we just talked about that. Where the project at, by the way, we did not mention that. That's pretty important to know. Where is this project at? Most of them actually have a map, just like a little Google screenshot that's actually on the map itself. Shows you what all the abbreviations and acronyms mean, and all the reference symbols. A lot of times, like you were talking about, all the code notes can actually be found on that sheet as well. The building size and so much more. Some very important thing to know is scale. And I have paid for many change orders when I was learning this, and sometimes I still do when I don't pay attention. Scale on a drawing simply means the ratio of that. 1/4 inch, for example, means 1 foot. Does anybody not understand scale? All it means is it's taking something from full size. How many built models when you were kids? Did they still do that? They did? Remember there was scale models, and I think it was 1/20, 1 in 20. It's kind of the same thing. It's just, it's a exact dimension, but it's scaled down or scaled up. Okay? Scale is really super important in your drawings. Why? Why is this so important? If the drawings are there, I can see all the scope, all the measurements are there. You know, I can use all the line measurements. Why is scale so important?
Because sometimes they don't have things measurement-wise correct on a print.
That's one. Definitely. What else?
You can even like, it's like a cheap way of figuring out if something fits or not, instead of going all the way.
Yeah, no, that's good. You can scale it down so you can see everything for one. What else? Yes, sir.
You can misdiagnose the whole project.
Exactly. That's the key one I was looking for too. And all these other ones are great examples. And I have done that. Just because the drawing, and if you're using digital takeoffs, which I guarantee, I can't guarantee, I'm going to almost guarantee that most of you are going to use some sort of digital takeoff. I doubt that you'll jump right to BIM. I would hope that your company is actually making you do either manual takeoffs or at least some form of 2D digital. If the scale says 1/4 inch and you go to your ruler or you go to your settings on your program and you set it to 1/4 inch per foot and you do this entire takeoff on the floor at 1/4 inch per foot, but that drawing was skewed or that drawing was the wrong size, your sheets actually make a difference. If they transfer that from an architectural D down to an 11 by 17 paper, even though to you it looks exactly the same, that scale may not be correct. So you measured something that should be 1,000 foot, but you used an incorrect scale, and now it's only 10 foot. What's that going to affect? Price. Big time. So, one thing, I did this for a long time. I had posties in front of me all the time. We used Post-its. Still, they still do that? Good. Check scale. I still do that. Check scale. Check scale. And I use PlanSwift. I use OnCenter. I use it in ConstructConnect, Takeoff, whatever. That's the first thing I do. I see a lot of plans also coming out lately in the last few years. I've seen a rise in where there's multiple drawings on this, or multiple items on the same drawings, and there's two different scales. So don't make the mistake of not checking the scale when there's two separate things like that. Just because it's, I've even seen where the scale that they put on there was not the right scale regardless. And with the digital tools, there's ways to check all that. So scale is super important, and it even says, which is funny, that they'll give you a scale on the drawing, and you'll verify the scale is correct. And there's always a note on the plans from the architect that says, do not scale drawings. That is their out, right, for liability. So the dimensions always override. A lot of steel, or structural steel guys don't even do takeoffs like we're thinking of it. They don't measure. They use the dimensions. They actually use an Excel sheet. Beam 1, drawing says it's 11 foot, 1/4 inch, whatever. So if you, occasionally it's always good to check a reference on something on the drawing to make sure that where something says it's 10 foot, measure it, make sure it's 10 foot. Make sure you check that scale. Some common architectural scales that you'll see, most of the time is 1/4 inch, 1/8 inch, 3/16, whatever the case is, those are real common. Common civil scales are much bigger. 1 inch equals 20 feet or something like that. Why do you think there's such a major difference between architectural and civil? Because the scope on civil can be much larger, exactly. So if I were to take a whole campus, university campus, try to put it on one drawing, 1/4 inch, I'm going to get just a fragment of maybe half of a building, maybe on that plan. So what they do is they just scale it down much farther. A lot of civil stuff like roads and highways, they'll even go, some of them have 1 in 100 feet and so on. So that's why they do that. How to verify the scale? Check the scale reference, and there is use a known dimension and check it. If there is no scale reference, use a known dimension and check it. It's the same answer for both. And I think I'll show you, here it is. So on almost every plan, they're going to have something that looks like this. I still never trust that completely and solely. I will always verify and make sure, okay, here's why. I had your president, the ASPE president, we were talking about this last night. He will never use this, and I'm actually going to change the slide going forward. This is not part of the building at all. It's a little footnote on the plan, right? Just because the architect put that footnote down here that says 1 inch equals 10 foot, go up somewhere on the drawing itself where it says something that's going to be built, something that's going in place, and check that dimension. And I'm going to actually change the slide to reference that because he's 100% correct, because I've had that happen where this, they just copy and pasted it from another project or whatever the case is, and it was completely wrong. Okay? Now, I've seen people take advantage of that. Some big civil contractors take advantage of that, and the first thing they get the job, they have a change order ready, and they say, oh, well, we bid for what the, da-da-da-da said. But anyways, it's still an arm wrestle. So always, always check your scale. They can vary, so always refer to the symbol legend on your drawings. And here's a couple examples. Remember we talked about some of the symbols? You want to make sure that you get familiarized with those. Some symbols are very universal. Others, the different architects have a variance on them. But they're still relatively the same. Always start understanding what the different items mean, and we'll talk about that here in just a little bit. As you can see, different architect, different types of symbols, but it still relates to the same thing. Right? Just little different variances on it. So for example, what is this on this plan right here? What is that? What does that mean?
Section.
It's a section. What's a section? Like a a place.
You need to go to A303 and look at section B to get a better detail of that view side.
Yep, and that's partially correct. So I'm looking at the top of this, I'm looking at a 2D version. This is a cross section, and when I go to that detail B on page A303, it's going to give me a visual now, sideways. See, I'm looking, pretend I'm standing on the ground. That's where the visualization comes in. I'm standing on the ground, looking that way, and for example, there should be a window right in front of me. I should be able to see that window, and maybe just all this brick, and that's exactly what I'll see. Well, I don't really see it on this cross section. That's the idea. I need to see the heights as well. So when I'm looking at these cross sections, it's showing me the heights and everything as well. The 2D doesn't give any of that information, right? For the most part, except on ceiling plans. Why is the heights important? What else is important about this? What's this helping you with? Remember, we're going from here, same area on the plans, to right here. Lots of it.
Kind of gives you an idea about how tall your structure is, what ceiling heights are.
Exactly. How tall is it? How ceiling heights? It gives, sometimes, I know you can't read this, sometimes it gives you really detailed information that this isn't just a wall with brick on it. There's rigid insulation in here, or there's different insulation in the wall, or there's blown-in insulation. It gives you much more indication. If you looked at this, would you have any idea that there was even a roof right there? It's got a two-step. You would have no idea, right? So that's what that is. Those kind of symbols are super important to be able to use the cross-section, and then it'll even go farther. Now it's giving you, we're looking at visually from the cross-section, but now it's even giving me more details on some things that are very important. Those call-out details are going to be super important on the scope board that you need to include. You can't just say, oh, I don't know, I took it off and there's insulation and some brick and studs. There's more information on it right here. Oh, I've got to go look at that. So I'll go look at it. Now it's giving me, that's that middle corner. This right here is now reflected right here. Why is that so important? That's the easy one. Details mean scope. What if I looked at this, and I'm going to pick something, I don't know if this is true or not, but if I looked at this, would I know that there's some wood right there, or some hardy panel? Probably not. When I look at this, I have no idea. It could be, I don't know, I can see the gutter, but I don't know what this is. Now, if there's a, I don't know, 10,000 feet of gutter that has that backing hardy panel on it, and I miss it because I didn't look at this detail, which specifically tells me exactly what that is. Metal wrapped 1x10 trim board. Oops, if I missed that. That's got to be installed, paid for, painted, and it has to be in place. Here's another part of it. That piece of wood has to be in place before the gutter guy can come out and put his gutter in. And if you don't have that in your scope, nobody picked it up, maybe everybody excluded it, or you just all missed it. It happens all the time. Gutters come out on the job, they're ready to go. There's no wood in place. Okay, we'll be back with y'all already. Now you just caused a big hiccup over something really, really simple. So again, backing up, there's the cross-section. I look at the cross-section, I can see more details. I go down into the details, and this gives me much more information. Some tips, tricks that I've seen other estimators use. They'll go through all of this before they start doing any takeoffs. A lot of us don't have that luxury of time to do that now, but it's a good idea to do it occasionally if you can. And I'll go through, an older gentleman taught me this years ago, and we use trade codes. I mean, all of you probably use some sort of trade codes, I'm hoping. So back in the day, we used the 95 trade codes, and I'll go through and I'll put the 95 code. Each one of these notes, everywhere in the project relates to. And the reason I'm doing that is, one, it showed I looked at it, right? And the other, it's getting me deeper into the scope of the whole project. I'll start seeing patterns in the project. Does that make sense? And here is a nice setup. Hopefully you're going to have no less than 2 monitors. I have 5, and I still don't think that's enough. You can be looking at that floor plan that we were looking at, and with certain programs, you can have as many pages open as you want. Here I'm looking at the cross-section, here I'm looking at the detail, all at one time. If you're doing that with paper, you're looking at the page, and you're going to page some, hold that one, and you're going to hold the other page, trying to hold, look at those all at the same time. Digitally, you can see it all at one time. And that's extremely helpful, at least to an old guy like me, to be able to have it all right in front of me. Questions on blueprints, on plans? Yes, sir?
What software allows you to open up different windows at the same time? We're using PlanSwift right now, and it does not allow that.
So PlanSwift is one of our companies. You're right, and it doesn't allow that. On-screen takeoff allows 2 pages open. However, the new one that we have, the cloud-based CCTO, it's called Concerted Takeoff. I can have 10 drawings open on different monitors at the same time, and each one of those windows I can mark up or measure in full functionality in all windows. There's nothing else out there like that right now. And that's the purpose we did that, is so that you can have as many things open as you want and be measuring on each one of those at the same time. Yes, sir?
Why the limitation on on-screen and
What's the what?
Like, why the limitation of like one window?
A big difference is the technology. So PlanSwift and OnCenter are what's called on-premise software. That means they're loaded onto your desktop, right? The cloud version of the CCTO is a part of the program is on your desktop, but all of the data, all of your takeoff and everything else is in the cloud. It's like a hybrid. So with that technology, we're able to do things that we couldn't with an on-premise software. I used OST I still do takeoffs. I have a landscaping contractor. I do occasional things for a flooring guy and a drywall guy. And I still use OST, and I'm starting to get frustrated now because I know with constructing a takeoff, I can have more open at the same time. But it's a tool. Think of it this way. It's a tool, and each tool does have its limitations. How many have used anything other than a hammer to hang a picture for somebody? I think we all have. I've used a crescent wrench, I've used my boot, I've used a rock. It's kind of the same thing. You have your limitations, but I'll use OST to the best of my ability, and I just know what the limitations are. So it's a good question. Any other questions? It's already 10:15? Holy cow. Okay, let's do this now. So here's some manual takeoff tools. I have each one of these. I had a house fire 3 years ago, and I lost all my really cool stuff, my ancient stuff. But anybody use one of these? Still? Awesome. I remember when these came out. It's called the Scale Master, and I can just roll on the plans, set the scale, and it gives me all the really quick. I bought the one that had the SCSI cord on it, and I could plug it in the back of my desktop, and I would do my scale, and I'd click enter on this thing, and it would enter into my Excel sheet. And I thought that was just the coolest thing in the world. Anybody have any of these? You know what these are? What are they? Yep, scale ruler, architectural scale ruler. And some, they have civil ones, and they have all the different scales on them. And they're great back scratchers too. I've had several of these. Anybody know what that is? Scale wheel? Same concept as this, just not digital. It has whatever you're looking for as far as the scale on here, and you roll it on the plans, and you convert that to whatever it needs to be in inches or feet. And of course, Project Calc, I still have one of those. Extremely helpful when you're doing pitches and things like that. These are some of the manual tools, and everybody knows what this is, right? Okay, very good. All right. Some other manual tools. If you're still using actual drawings, man, I had more crayons and stuff than kindergartners. Because every color to me, and I transposed this, by the way, when I went digital, those colors still mean something to me. So red is always bad. Red is always something to look at. Yellow is something cool. And then as far as trays, I have different colors as well. Orange is always the walls, blah, blah, blah. So, highlighters, scale masters, walking wheels. You know, anybody use one of those walking wheels? Same concept as those roller wheels, but for civil, because you can walk a mile with those things if you want to measure. Calculators, I highly recommend you still, even digitally, that you still keep these handy. Because sometimes it's good to make sure that you are checking stuff and you still know your math. I'm losing it. As I get older, I don't use mine near enough. I'm relying solely on the program. And there's times when you have to do a calculation in your head. I got stuck here recently trying to figure out the cubic feet of a cylinder of a pier. And I was like, couldn't remember. I could not remember the formula because all my programs do it for me now. So, yellow sheet, we've always called those yellow sheets. I don't know why estimators like the yellow ones. Every company I ever worked for, we had yellow sheets. Those yellow sheets were also used for inclusions and exclusions. I'd be scoping out a sub's proposal, and I'd have all of my comments on that proposal on the yellow sheet for him, stapled to his proposal. So when I give it to the project manager, he had a full history disclosure of what I had on that guy. So these are some other manual tools. What else might you be using manually? What if you have new set of drawings and you get an addenda? How are you looking at those on paper? How are you doing that? Or how would you do that manually? What's that? Well, let's say you printed them off. You have sheet 1 and then you have sheet 1 with the addendum one. How do you see the differences? We used to do that in the field all the time. Put it up to the light, get them together, and trace them. I would use trace paper, and we would trace out the differences so we could see them immediately. I was at a swap meet the other day, it's a big swap meet, and I saw one of those, they used to have a table, it's a little bit bigger than this, and they had fluorescent lights underneath it. It was glass, and you would put your plans on top of it. The technology that we have now will do that for you, right? But just understand we didn't always have that, and it's still good to know those things. So digital takeoff offers a whole lot more than manual, obviously. There's a couple things that it will help you with. I know I got to kind of speed through this now. It's faster, obviously. It's more accurate. I mean, I'm talking any digital takeoff tool you use, whether it's one of ours or somebody else's. Any digital takeoff is going to be faster than the manual. Anybody ever heard that old John Henry story about the train? They don't teach that anymore. John Henry used to lay trap. He was a great big man. And he said that he could do it faster than this new steam machine that they had. And he didn't believe the machine could do it faster than him. He did, in the story, he did beat the machine, but he died. What I'm getting at is this will always be faster. Don't let anybody tell you any different. I've had arguments, sometimes heated arguments with estimators about that. Digital will make you faster, make you more accurate. It's also collaborative. You can create, in all these digital platforms, I can create, these are almost like checklists. I can bring a whole library over, and it helps, like if I want to, I can say, I have transition strip. Do I have that on this project? I'll start looking for it and I'll start doing the takeoffs. So it helps also guide you through the project. It also becomes collaborative. How is this now considered collaborative? Give me a good example real quick. I'm doing this takeoff and I've got an RFI. I have markup tools. I can cloud this area, put a question on it, and send it off that fast. If I want to send it to the architect as an RFI, or maybe it's just a question from my boss. Hey, I've never done this, whatever this is here before. How do you want me to approach that? Just send it to me. So it's extremely collaborative. It's in, real time. Obviously, it saves on printing costs. What else? What else can something like this do, whether it's on-screen takeoff, whether it's looping, whether it's, what else can it do that I haven't mentioned here? What's your favorite part about it if you're using one right now? Very good. That's exactly right. When you're all done with this, and if you give a copy of this whole takeoff to your superintendent, he knows exactly what you took off. So remember the arm wrestling we talked about at the beginning? If you have this takeoff, you know that it helps that superintendent understand how to develop the cost for that job. So again, that collaborative part is a huge role in this. So the tools, some of the software, what is takeoff software? Let me rephrase that. Let's see if this is on here. We gotta speed up a little bit. These are some of the ones we have. What does takeoff mean? Anybody even know where that term came from? It's not that interesting, but just so you know, because you're going to be doing it. Takeoff came from an old term when we used to have blueprints or vellums, that they used to call them too, and they would take those off the drawings. Whether they traced them, however they did it, it was a manual takeoff process, and they would take off the drawings. And that term is just stuck. So that's what takeoff is. If anybody ever asks you, it's not a very fun answer, but that's exactly what it is. So software, there's several different types. Obviously, we have 4, but there's a lot out there. There's ProS, there's Construct Connect Takeoff. I mean, there's several different ones. I am seeing a huge trend, and remember, I deal with thousands of subcontractors and general contractors yearly, and I've seen this huge trend where companies are allowing their estimators to bring in their own programs. I'm not suggesting that you go to your boss and say, well, Mark said that we can bring in our own, because your company may already have specific licenses and they want you to use very specific programs, which I understand both. I'm just saying I see a huge trend where somebody will come in, they have been using OnScreen for years. The company doesn't care. Hey, if that helps you get a better number, continue using it. Okay, but there's lots of options out there. And if you're not using any right now, almost every one that's out there offers free trials. Start utilizing them and find something that you get familiar with if you're not using it now. Something that you think will help you. Estimating, same thing. There are programs out there. QuickBid, Excel. Obviously, I think Excel is most widely used. How many use Excel in here? Everybody. Except for a couple. All right. I don't think it's going to die anytime soon. So find the one that fits your needs. Again, this one's on screen. There's Plan Swift, so on. There's a couple other things about these. So not only can you use these tools for takeoffs, you can just use them to visually read and look at the documents. If you've got, and this is going to happen to you guys, you're going to get an invitation to bid from Mr. GC or vice versa, somebody, you're going to get a digital set of drawings and you need to see them. Now, most of the time they come in a PDF or a TIFF format and you're able to quickly just download them and use your Adobe to kind of review them. However, if you use any of these other softwares, they have free versions of those. And the free version allows you to actually load those drawings in and look at them, even print them off. Most of them allow you to do some markups. It's great for reviewing projects that maybe you're not even sure you're going to bid yet, but it's out there and you're not taking advantage of it. Again, those are free. So yes, they're going to call you to keep trying to get you to buy the program, but at the same time, it's something that's available for you. It's a great resource. Reading specs. What is a spec? What's a spec? You're going to hear that a lot. What's the spec say? I don't know. Go to the spec.
Definition of specifically what they want, like a type of gear or something.
Specification. So it's a very specific. So what is this finish? What is this wall covering? I don't know. It looks like some sort of vinyl something or other. No, on that project, when they built this building, there was probably 2 or 3 sheets of paper dedicated to exactly what type, what manufacturer, what brand, what color, and everything else that this specific wall covering came in. And those are going to be super important to you on the job, because if you're looking at a project, don't ever assume that the plans are showing everything. The specs always will overrule anything that's on the plans. And if you find a contradiction where, well, the plan says level 4 finish, the specs say level 5 throughout, you've got a big problem. And the sooner you catch that and RFI it, the better. Okay, so always make sure that you're reading your specs. There's programs out there like ours, and a couple others where you can actually, in OCRs, you know what OCR is? OCR is called optical character recognition. It means a program goes through that document and it looks for, it breaks everything down to where now it's all searchable text. Think of it as converting it to a Word document where all the text is now searchable. Our program also does that on the plans. You can search for any word on a set of plans as well. Those kind of tools come in really, really handy when you're trying to find something. Okay? And most of these, the software that I mentioned, even like Bluebeam and Press, most of those offer that. Utilizing those is just viewers, if you will. Markups. So many of ours do markups. Markups are super important as well because if I want to mark up a drawing with, I don't know, clouds or finger pointing or arrows or text box or something to send questions out, or if I'm going through my project and I find something very specific I want all the drywall guys to know or all the concrete guys to know, I'll make up a quick little drawing, takes me like 30 seconds, and I'll send that out to all the subs. I'll even make that part of my construction documents. Make sense? Sort of? Okay. All right. Wow, we got like 5 minutes. Okay. Basic takeoffs. There are 3 common types of takeoffs. What are those? Anybody know? There's linear. There's area. What's the last one? Count. Very good. Linear, area, and count. So anything that's a line from point A to point B, and so on, is linear. Not counting the heights yet. You're just counting how long something is, right? A count, pretty self-explanatory. That's how many of these items there are. An area can be is square footage, square yards, whatever the case is, of an area. What would be a few examples of linear takeoffs? Would fencing be a good example of a linear takeoff? Partitions, walls, yes. And what about curves? Okay. So a linear takeoff will give you the linear footage, such as can I get square feet from a linear takeoff? If you put a condition to it, I mean, you can even do that in Excel or on paper. So if I take off this linear footage of this dividing wall, and I know it's approximately, I don't know, 40 feet or whatever it is, I can guess and look at this, that's like 14 feet high or something like that, and I just do the calculations that gives me the square footage. Most of these programs, when you do linear, you can set the height on those. So automatically, on most programs, it gives you the square footage of one side, both sides, top and bottom. Then it can also give you all the volume. How important is the volume of something you're taking off linear? What would be a good example of that? I need to know the volume of something I've measured that's 3 feet high, 2 feet wide. Exactly. Concrete. We heard, sorry, I can't remember his name now, talking about the volume of concrete. All the GCs I worked for, we still do takeoffs. And that's exactly what I would take all the concrete off, and I had kind of a ballpark, 550, 700, whatever it was, that I would look at. So it's important, while I'm doing those linear takeoffs, no matter what program I'm using, it's giving me the volume of medium as well. What would be a few examples of typical area takeoffs? I'm going to kind of speed through these because I know it's time's almost up, and these are pretty self-explanatory. But you can start thinking of other ways to use these because anything is an area. A roof. Well, what about roofs that are on a pitch? Most programs offer that. You put in it's 4 inches per foot, whatever, it'll give you the actual square footage and so on. An area can give you what type of results? Obviously square foot, square yards, cubic yards, we just talked about. And what other? Most programs will offer. If I'm doing, let's say, all this is flooring. Let's say I'm taking out the flooring. What else might I be able to get off of drawing in square? The area, right? What else could I possibly get while I'm drawing that's segment? Exactly, perimeter. Why is the perimeter important? Well, I have base, right? Some of our programs offer you to do both at the same time. I click base and floor, and it's taking both out at the same time, which is really cool. A few examples of typical counts. Registers, and by that I mean the air conditioning, ducts, bollards, those big concrete posts that keep you from running into the building, things like that. Restroom accessories, and so on. What else can a count do? With most of the software, well, let's say that you're taking off piers. Drill piers, you guys do piers up here, right? Concrete piers? Okay. What else is really important? We just talked about it a moment ago. Concrete. If I have a pier, what do I need? I don't need to know exactly how many. What's more important to know on that specific type of count? The volume. So most of these programs, without having to do all the math, pi squared, blah, 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 I just do, it's already in the formula. Show me, I want to know maybe the perimeter of it, because maybe it has a specific, I don't know if you guys do that under this screen or whatever that has to go around the pier itself. I need all these measurements off of just one count. And you can do that with almost all of these digital platforms. So you can use your takeoff imports, I should say exports actually. So all this information that as you're doing these takeoffs in your digital format, you can export that information a lot of times into something else that you're using to actually break down and get your cost. Whether it's Excel, a lot of programs have what's called the live link. If you have a master Excel sheet, you can say, hey, Mr. Program, while I'm taking off the flooring, I want you to also put the results in respect of cell. And as you're doing the takeoff, it's automatically putting that information in there. We have some integrated programs, QuickBid. OST also integrates with Sigma and a few QuickBooks and several other programs, right? Booksoft, PlanSwift, and that's about it. We're almost out of time. Questions before we break? We went through a lot, and I know a lot of it was very, very basic. But I wanted to make sure, just to make sure that you guys understood those basics. I would love to answer any questions. I'm going to be sitting out at the table for most of the day. I'd love to show you some of the stuff that we have, some solutions that we have that helps with some of the stuff I talked about too. I'm not a sales guy, I promise. I'm not a sales guy. I just love to help people.